Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our annual Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony for 2026, here in person at City Hall and online. My name is Mary Harpley, and I'm the Chief Officer here at the Greater London Authority. Thank you, Lenka, for that beautiful opening performance. Today's event is supported by the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and Holocaust Educational Trust and continues to serve as a poignant reminder of the senseless loss of life through war, persecution and conflict in the name of an ideology. It is an opportunity to educate current generations about the dangers of persecution, anti-Semitism, racism and discrimination in all its forms. This year, Holocaust Memorial Day, marked formally on the 27th of January, marks 81 years of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration camp complex, and 31 years since the genocide in Bosnia. Today, please join with me as we remember those murdered during the Holocaust under Nazi persecution and in the genocides which followed in Bosnia, Darfur, Cambodia and Rwanda. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day this year is Bridging Generations. It's a call to action, a reminder that the responsibility of remembrance does not end with the survivors. It lives on through their children, their grandchildren, and through all of us. This theme encourages us all to actively engage with the past, to listen, to learn, and to carry those lessons forward. By doing so, we build a bridge between memory and action, between history and hope for the future. Bridging Generations invites us to honour each life and honour too those who left no family to carry their legacy, whose legacies live on, not through bloodlines, but through books, films and other interpretations. So we'll begin our event this morning by hearing an address from Andrew Boff, Deputy Chair of the London Assembly.
Thank you, Mary. On behalf of the London Assembly, Thank you for joining us at City Hall for another year to commemorate the millions of lives lost during the Holocaust as a result of Nazi persecution. We take this as an opportunity to also commemorate recent genocides across the globe, such as in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. I would like to begin by thanking the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust who make this commemoration possible. Their invaluable work, year-round, allows us the privilege of hearing from survivors here today. Beyond this, the work of the Trust is central to the 10,000+ local activities that take place on Holocaust Memorial Day on the 27th of January. This year's theme, as Mary has alluded to, is called Bridging Generations, emphasising the responsibility on us of remembering the Holocaust and the genocide. As the passage of time since the Holocaust widens, the cherished opportunity to hear first-hand accounts from survivors and their descendants diminishes. However, we mustn't allow time or distance to desensitise us to the devastating consequences of the Holocaust and subsequent genocides in the world. That is why, in a time of heightened division, it is crucial that all of us continue to engage in acts of remembrance like today's ceremony. The generations who endured the brutality of the genocide continue to do their part by telling their story. And as we reflect on their experiences of where hatred, exclusion and dehumanisation can lead, we must also remember why the international community came together after the Holocaust to place human rights beyond the reach of any single government. The rights set out in the European Convention on Human Rights were born directly from the lessons of this darkest chapter in history. They exist to protect the dignity of every person, especially when it is inconvenient, unpopular, or politically difficult to do so. When such protections are weakened, ignored, or treated as optional, it is not abstract principles that are lost first, but real safeguards for real people. History shows that atrocities do not begin with violence alone, but with the gradual erosion of legal protections and the quiet narrowing of who is considered worthy of rights. Holocaust Memorial Day reminds us that defending those rights is not optional. If we allow them to be weakened, we risk forgetting not only what happened, but why we promised it must never happen again. Shalom Aleichem.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So, ladies and gentlemen, I now introduce Sir Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London.
This is a poem from a 12-year-old, Eva Pikova, called Fear. Today the ghetto knows a different fear. Close in its grip, death wields an icy scythe. An evil sickness spreads a terror in its wake. The victims of its shadow weep and writhe. Today a father's heartbeat tells his fright, and mothers bend their heads into their hands. Now children choke and die with typhus here. A better tax is taken from their bands. My heart still beats inside my breast, while friends depart for other worlds. Perhaps it's better, who can say, than watching this to die today. No, my God, we want to live, not watch our numbers melt away. We want to have a better world. We want to work. We must not die.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to introduce Anna Bradford, Interim Chief Programmes and Outreach Officer of the Holocaust Educational Trust. Anna.
Good morning. My name is Anna Bradford and I am the Interim Chief Programmes and Outreach Officer at the Holocaust Educational Trust. We're a charity whose mission is to ensure that everyone knows what the Holocaust was and why this seismic event in history remains so relevant for all of us today. And as we approach Holocaust Memorial Day, we must pause and we must remember. Holocaust Memorial Day falls on the 27th of January every year, the day that in 1945 Soviet troops liberated the most notorious site of the Holocaust, Auschwitz-Birkenau. And today, over 80 years later, it is hard to imagine the scenes those liberators witnessed. Unimaginable horror. Skeletal figures clinging to life, mountains of belongings stripped from victims, and a deafening silence where once vibrant lives have been extinguished. Today we remember the victims of the Holocaust, the 6 million Jewish men, women and children brutally murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, including the approximately 1 million whose names and identities will never be known because their entire community and everyone who knew them were wiped out, leaving not a soul on earth to remember them. Today we also remember all other victims of Nazi persecution, millions more lives and dreams erased. We also honour the survivors who, against all odds, rebuilt their lives and even now, over 80 years on, continue to dedicate themselves to sharing their most painful memories to audiences across the country. And in the last year, we have again been reminded of the passage of time as we have lost a number of incredible friends, Holocaust survivors whose powerful testimonies brought the reality of the past to the present. And this morning, I want to particularly pay tribute to Harry Ulmer, MBE, who passed away just last week at the age of 98. Harry survived the unimaginable, the occupation of his hometown in Poland, slave labour in the most brutal conditions, and the murder of almost his entire family. By the end of the war, only Harry and his siblings, Sarah and Joe, were left. Yet Harry, who came to the UK with other child survivors in 1945, was full of life. He was often the first to arrive at an event and the last to leave. He loved people and he was determined to share his story with others and to ensure we learned from the past. This year's theme for Holocaust Memorial Day, Bridging Generation, takes on new poignancy in light of Harry's passing. Harry shared his testimony with thousands of students across the country, including hundreds of Holocaust Educational Trust ambassadors, and he was so impressed with their commitment to carrying survivor testimonies forward. As survivor voices fade, it becomes our collective duty to ensure that the experiences of those who were murdered and those who survived are remembered. Along with the descendants of survivors, we must continue to educate about what happened, and we must continue to share the testimonies and experiences that we have heard about. We must ensure that this history remains part of our collective memory. And today it is not enough to simply remember the past. While today is not the 1930s, we do have to be honest about the world in which we live. Anti-Semitism across the globe is at frightening levels, and in the last months of 2025, we saw terror attacks targeting Jewish people on our religious holidays, Yom Kippur at Teton Park Synagogue in Manchester, and at a Hanukkah celebration on Bondi Beach in Sydney. We have recently seen a Jewish MP banned from visiting a school, and schools who are fearful of marking Holocaust Memorial Day. We have to speak out, to be active in the fight against anti-Jewish hatred, and to work to create a society where anti-Semitism will no longer be tolerated. We're about to hear from Holocaust survivor Anique Lever, BEM. She is an incredible woman with an incredible testimony to share. I hope you will remember Anique's story, and I'm sure that you will. I hope you will share what you have learned and heard today, and more importantly, I hope you will join me in ensuring that we continue to remember and to commemorate the Holocaust, to remember the lives of all those who were murdered and who deserve to be remembered today and in the future. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Anique Lever, BEM.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anique Lever, and I am an Holocaust survivor. I was born in November 1943 in Nazi-occupied France. My parents met the summer of 1939 when my mother, my aunt, and my grandparents came on holidays to the southwest of France. My mother was Jewish, but my father was Catholic. I always was told that my mother and my aunt, her sister, were two very beautiful women, and they practiced what you call risping ballet, which they did on the professional levels as well. My grandfather was from Belgium, and my grandmother was originally from Holland. She was the first girl to go to university in Holland, and she spoke 7 languages. My grandparents had 3 daughters, and when war was declared, one of my aunts, the eldest one, was already married and lived in Amsterdam. The rest of the family came to live in Paris. Life became very difficult when the Nazis invaded the occupied France in 1940. My family was staying in a seaside town in the southwest of France, but their home was in Paris. After the Nazi invaded, my grandfather was able to return only once to Paris to the apartment to get whatever he could bring back with him. Almost overnight, French Jews were subjected to a series of anti-Jewish laws which stripped them of their rights and freedoms, including adhering to a curfew and having to wear the yellow star, which started in 1942. Soon, it was declared that no Jews could live by the coast. So my family moved sort of 35 kilometers inland in a small village where my father had an uncle. And that village is actually where I was born. My parents and I lived with the uncle. My aunt and grandparents rented accommodations. The situation to my parents and all Jews was becoming increasingly more frightening and dangerous. On the 30th of January, 1944, my parents were invited to a friend's home, and while they're there, my mother had a premonition that something bad was going to happen. She asked a family friend that should anything happen, would she look after me until she returned. Remember, they had no idea what was going on, really. The friend agreed, but pleaded with my mother to not speak that way. They were there to try to enjoy the day, a little bit of a relief for them. When we returned home in the evening, the French police were waiting to arrest us. My father talked them into waiting until the next day. They agreed, but we were guarded. My mother and my aunt put a lot of clothing on because they were only allowed to take a little case with them. And we were taken to, I was only 2 months old, and along with my mother, my aunt, my cousin who was a year old, and grandparents, we were taken to a prison that used to be a school in the biggest town in the area, it was called La Rochelle, and retained there to await deportation to Drancy, which was the biggest transit camp in France, to think of a 2-month-old baby in prison simply for what she was. My father showed great courage as a member of the French resistance, and with the help of some friends, he was able to smuggle me and my cousin out. I was wrapped up in blankets, and my cousin was wrapped in a shawl. Thankfully, neither of us cried to give us away. Another prisoner became aware of what was taking place and pleaded with my parents' friends to also take her children, who were 5 and 8 years old. At first, the friend said she couldn't, but the woman said, if you had the heart of a mother, you could not refuse. What she did not know that this friend sadly had lost a little boy only a few months previously. So what happened? They walked out of the prison with the 2 babies, my cousin, myself, and those 2 children. I have to tell you actually straight away that those 2 children survived. So did their parents, and they found each other at the end of the war. We became great friends with them, and they were tailors. And when I got engaged, they actually made my outfit, so there was no hard feeling there. My mother and aunt were equally brave. My father had false identity cards made for them and had paid someone to leave the door of the prison open. But when they stepped out, they realized they could not leave their parents, and they returned to the prison. They were deported by cattle train to Auschwitz-Birkenau on the 10th of February 1944. None of them survived. The official papers had stated that my mother was presumed dead, but for a long time there was no information about what had really happened. And a small part of me hoped that there was a chance she could come back. After the war, a woman who had survived Auschwitz and been in the same transport as my mother, aunt and grandparents, traveled back to Paris and searched for some of our relatives. She informed the family that one of the sisters, my mother, had been shot in the way to Auschwitz. I'm sorry. Her name, Liliane Xavier, sits in the book of names in block 27 at Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum, permanently written into the dark history. The fate of my mother is something that still pains me to this day. Like all Holocaust survivors, our grief never fades, and our memories only become harder to bear. I live in hiding with a family friend whom I called Mimi, and I continue to be raised as a Catholic. It wasn't until I was 17 that I realized I really learned about my Jewish identity. I received a letter from the surviving family in Holland, and my father began to tell me a little bit about what had happened. I traveled to Amsterdam to visit my surviving aunt, uncle, and cousins, and immediately felt at home with them. They started to open my eyes to my Jewish heritage, the tragedy of my family, and the fate of my Jewish relatives. I stayed with them for several months, then returned to France to train as a nurse. I came to Britain in 1963 as an au pair. My Dutch family relatives had arranged this and purposely chose a Jewish family for me to stay with, so that I could learn about Jewish way of life. I actually landed in Bristol, and I didn't even have a passport, but they let me in, just the same. I arrived in August, and in September, they took me to the synagogue for Rosh Hashanah. It was the first time in my life that I had been in a synagogue. And it was there, at that time, that I met the man who was to become my husband, Alan. We have been married for 58 years, and we have 2 sons and 5 granddaughters. This Holocaust Memorial Day, we are reflecting on the theme, Bringing Generations. It reminds us of the events of the past, while also prompting us to look to the future. For Holocaust survivors, the idea of generations is a complex and poignant one. We think of the murdered generations of our families, the destruction of whole families and communities that will never exist again, the 1.5 million children murdered, a whole generation ripped from the world. I think of my mother and grandparents, the generations of my family that I was too young to really know and remember. I think too of my children who never had a maternal grandmother. It reminds me that the grief and losses of the Holocaust are never far from our minds and continue to be felt even 81 years on. Our painful memories are our bridge to the lost generation. We think of the future with a complicated mixture of anxiety and hope. We question how and who will take our story to the future generations. Who will remember us when our generation is no more? And in a climate of rising anti-Jewish hatred, with attacks on Jewish communities here in the UK and abroad, there are reasons to be fearful. I remember being called dirty Jew when I was only 11 years old. That was long after the Holocaust. Now, Jewish children in this country I call mine are afraid once more. But there are reasons for hope. Over the years, I have had the pleasure of meeting many brilliant young students, including Holocaust Educational Trust ambassadors, who have visited Auschwitz-Birkenau and who have pledged to remember. Whenever I meet them or think about their dedication, I can't help but feel deeply moved. Many of the ambassadors are not Jewish. They have no direct connection to the history, and yet they are passionate about safeguarding its memory and not only this, but challenging anti-Semitism wherever they encounter it. They inspire me. They are not only a bridge between my generation and the future, but they are also a bridge from despair to hope. I am deeply grateful to them all. This Holocaust Memorial Day, I will remember the generations of my family who perished and look again to the future generation to keep their memory alive. Thank you to the Holocaust Educational Trust and the thousands of young people who hear our stories. The bridge between the generations may stand firm. I can never forget that my mother was just an ordinary person, but because she was born Jewish, they killed her. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Anique. I don't think anybody listening to your testimonial this morning is going to forget what they've heard you say. I just want also to thank Anna for your introduction. You talked, Anique, about some brilliant students, and we are going to hear from two of them now. I'm going to introduce students Mohammed Musa Al-Kafaji and Aniska Kodabandalou, two ambassadors who will share their reflections on participating in the Holocaust Educational Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed Al-Kafaji, and this is Anisa Kodabandalou, and we are ambassadors for the Holocaust Educational Trust. We took part in the Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project as students from Clarion School in Barnet at the end of last year. As part of the project, we had testimony from a Holocaust survivor, took part in a one-day visit to the former Nazi concentration and death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, and since returning, we'll be sharing what we learned with our school community.
I wanted to take part in this project because I enjoy history, but I realized that much of my understanding of the Holocaust came mainly from textbooks. While important, these can create a distance between events and the people behind them. It can cause us to think of statistics instead of human lives, numbers instead of real people. And I thought this was a gap in my understanding. Through the project, I began to see those affected as people persecuted because they were Jewish. Visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau was one of the most powerful and confronting experiences of the project. Being exposed to such a vast, silent site layered with memory was overwhelming. Yet, at the same time, I noticed nature continuing around the site, including swarms of ladybirds across the ground and walls. Seeing such clear signs of life in a place defined by so much loss was deeply unsettling. As the last generation able to hear testimony directly from Holocaust survivors, this opportunity carries real weight. During the project, we heard from Eva Clark, BAM, who was born in a concentration camp just days before liberation. She shared her mother's story, and hearing such a personal family experience made the Holocaust feel immediate rather than distant. It reinforced why it is so important that these stories continue to be remembered and shared. And as a Holocaust Educational Trust ambassador, I commit to sharing Eva's story and ensuring she is remembered.
As part of the Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project, each participant completes a next step project to share what they have learned with others. My next step project focused on Holocaust denial and took the form of a poster. The poster combines imagery from Auschwitz with examples of misleading or false claims commonly found online. At the center of the poster is the message, Think, Verify, Speak, encouraging people to question online content verify sources, and speak out when they encounter denial or distortion. A key part of the project was ensuring people understand the Holocaust for what it was: the organised murder of 6 million men, women and children at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators. I hope the project has a meaningful impact, particularly among us young people, because I do not believe Holocaust denial usually stems from hatred, but from lack of education and understanding. Reflecting on both the visit and my Next Step project, I now understand the Holocaust is not only about remembering the past, but also about recognizing responsibility in the present. The Holocaust was the result of choices made by individuals, which makes its lessons especially relevant today, as it shows how quickly hatred and anti-Semitism can escalate when misinformation goes unchallenged.
The lessons from Usher's project has been challenging but deeply meaningful for both of us, and we are committed to carrying its lessons forward as ambassadors. We are committed to safeguarding the memory of the Holocaust and standing up for anti-Semitism and any other forms of hatred, whenever and wherever we see it. Thank you for Holocaust Education Trust and for City Hall to invite us today to be here, to share our experiences and reflections on Holocaust education.
Thank you very much, Mohammed and Anissa. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome back to City Hall Olivia Marks-Waldman, OBE, Chief Executive of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust.
Thank you. Friends, in October last year, an elderly man joined me in my family's sukkah for tea to celebrate the Jewish festival of Sukkot, where we spend a week eating in a temporary hut to recall the years the Jewish people wandered through the desert, living in temporary dwellings. The festival reminds us how fortunate we are to live in more substantial homes, how grateful we are for the friends and colleagues and neighbours whom we welcome into our sukkah, and how our shelter is given by God. These temporary huts are pretty shaky. They certainly let in a lot of rain. And we are reminded how fragile life can be. This particular guest arrived with his own lulav and etrog, special items for religious use on the festival. And perhaps most importantly for him, he arrived with his 2 daughters. His smile lit up the sukkah, and he spent the afternoon laughing, chatting, and enjoying plenty of tea and cake. His life had been more fragile than most. Born Chaim Olmer, and known to many of us here, as Anna has said, as Harry Olmer, he endured slave labour as a young boy before being sent to Buchenwald concentration camp. He arrived in Britain after liberation as one of the boys, also including some girls, and he recuperated in the Lake District before rebuilding his life here in Britain, training as a dentist and spending decades sharing his testimony with others. As Anna told us, he died last week, aged 98. Those of us privileged to have known Harry will mourn him every day, not only on Holocaust Memorial Day. But Holocaust Memorial Day enables hundreds of thousands of people who did not know Harry to learn about his history and to mourn the 6 million Jewish men, women, children and babies who were murdered in the Holocaust just because they were Jewish. In thousands of events such as this one, in our nation's cities and towns, people are joining together just as we are. We are the last generation who were privileged to meet and listen to Holocaust survivors such as Anik and to hear their witness testimony for ourselves. We now have that responsibility to pass on that testimony. This is one of the reasons we chose Bridging Generations as the theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day. It asks us to reach across time and experience, to keep memory and history alive, and use them to shape a future that protects the dignity of every human being. You are all doing that by coming today, and please take that next step by sharing what you have heard today with others, with your colleagues when you go back to your desks, with your families when you go home this evening, with your friends tomorrow. And on the 27th of January, Holocaust Memorial Day itself, Light a candle and place it in your window at 8 p.m. to light the darkness. Commemorating and learning about the Holocaust shows us where prejudice ultimately led when it was normalised. We know that since then, there have been places where prejudice has led to legally recognised genocide, such as in Bosnia 31 years ago. Our next speaker, Safet Vukalic, was born in Prijedor, Bosnia, and as a young man watched his father and older brothers forced out of the house at gunpoint and taken to a concentration camp because they were Muslim. Today, Safet combines work and family life with sharing his experiences, and we are so honoured he is joining us at City Hall today. Safet.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see the interest throughout the year, as it should be, not just in January, but obviously 27th of January is the most important day. But the work of HMTD continues throughout the year, and it is more important than ever, and it continues year after year to be more important. I learned, which was mentioned by the ambassadors earlier, about learning of numbers and concentration camps names when it comes to Holocaust, and that was our history lesson. But the impact they had on people that survived, no one teaches you that. I've learned myself a lot from Holocaust survivors. It's the first time today I met Nick, but I had the pleasure of meeting a number of them over the years, and no one teaches you at school the impact it has on survivors. Yes, absolutely it's important to know what's happened and where, and hopefully learn why, so we can prevent further genocides, further wars. But impact it has on you when you have to live the rest of your life having witnessed your family members, your friends, your neighbourhood disappearing in front of your eyes just because of who they were. Not that they've done anything wrong, but they're of wrong religion. And in my case, when it came to 1992, and that's obviously following Holocaust, following the world saying never again, following the United Nations Geneva Convention, and all the human rights laws, and you think we're protected. We were in Europe. And in 1992, when, with the fall of Yugoslavia, they were republics who decided to almost work together, almost they actually did work together in the end to try and divide Bosnia. And unfortunately, what we saw, the international community ignored the pleas of people of Bosnia to come and intervene in 1992 to prevent bloodshed. The international community kept talking, kept meeting after meeting, and unfortunately, it came to 1992, me watching my brother, my dad, and my neighbourhood being taken away to a concentration camp. And I keep saying Europe, 1992. Because of Holocaust, Europe should never have allowed that. And that's, I have often apologized to people from other continents, but there is a reason why I keep saying Europe, because you think if it can happen in Europe, then we cannot be surprised happening elsewhere. And on 31st of May 1992, when the local government was taken over by the local Serbs, and they were led by the Nationalist Party, they started broadcasting messages. And this was all to try and confuse other Serbian population who didn't want to contribute in the war, but to try to make them afraid of their neighbours. And some of the stories that they were putting on radio were that Muslim doctors were infecting Serbian women over the years, not to have children, and that Muslims had lists of which Serbs to kill. And we've never had our list. There was no list, but this was propaganda. And on 31st of May 1992, on the radio, the local government declared that all non-Serbs, and in Prijedor case meant predominantly Muslim population, would have to wear a white armband and display a white flag on their house, supposedly for their own safety. Now, having talked about learning from Holocaust survivors, I know what that meant and where the idea came from. And my dad did put a white flag on the house, and one hopes that we'll do something to protect you. Because the militia that came in from Serbia as well, the local Serbs were marking their houses and actually writing Serbian house. So because the soldiers that were coming from Serbia, as well as part of occupied in Croatia at the time, they were afraid they're going to be attacked themselves if those people get a wrong house. And then shortly after that, in June, the soldiers came. We heard the shooting around the town and the villages burning, but you still hope, because of our neighbourhood that was mixed in terms of religion, you hope that's not going to happen to us. Up until the day of soldiers coming into our streets, our neighbours, and when I say our neighbours, all of our neighbours, my dad and my Serbian neighbours, they were patrolling the streets in the evening to make sure nothing happens in our neighbourhood, because we all felt, yes, there might be wars and our politicians might want to continue wars and division, but we don't want anything to happen to our neighbourhood. However, when the soldiers came, and there were soldiers, certainly not from our neighbourhood, there were soldiers from elsewhere, and there were soldiers from even Serbia on that day. And they came through our streets and asked for all the men to come out. Now, we knew what that meant, and my dad, my brother, and the whole neighbourhood started walking on the road. I was 16 at the time. I was tall as I am now. I don't think I grew an inch since. And I started walking too, and my mum said to me, you get back to the house, you're just a child. And I've never argued with my mum and didn't certainly think of doing it that day. And I did go back to the house. And I feel that saved me because I believe I would not survive a concentration camp. My brother, my dad, and my neighbours were first taken to the main road, and we heard the shooting, and you keep thinking what's happening, etc. I learned a few things later on. My dad, for example, was stopped from being beaten up by soldiers by a soldier who was from Serbia, who introduced himself to the group and asked what was happening there. And he said where he was from, and he said he had no choice. He wouldn't be able to work in Serbia if he didn't come to the front line. But as they started beating people up, this soldier, as I said, who'd never met my dad before, met him for the first day, he came forward and said, "Stop doing this. We've got our jobs to do, but this is not what we have to do." And beating stopped. My brother was hit by one soldier 5 times until he started bleeding. Then the soldier walks away. Another soldier comes to him and takes him to wash the blood of his head. So even the soldiers were not all the same, and we cannot treat people from one group the same. And the war continued. My brother and my dad were first taken to a concentration camp called Keratin, which used to be a factory. And then eventually there was a push by the international community, even though they didn't really do much to stop the war. But they tried to do something. And in August 1992, I believe 6th of August 1992, there were British journalists who got permission to come and film the concentration camps. Now, just before that, the Keratin concentration camp was closed. My dad was at the time in Omarska concentration camp. That was his second. He was moved to Manica, which was his third concentration camp, and my brother was moved from Keratin to Ternopil concentration camp, which used to be a school, and it was turned into a concentration camp. So they closed Keratin, and the British journalists came, and they went to Ternopil concentration camp. And if you turn that video, which you can still find on YouTube, if you turn that video into black and white, you'll be wondering, are we talking 40s or is this 90s Europe? And I thought at that point, this is British journalists now. This is not anymore what was referred to as Muslims against Serbs, against Croats. and who can we trust? This was British journalists who were reporting it, and I honestly thought this is it. The international community cannot now ignore it. These are the facts. This is a concentration camp in Europe, and it must be stopped. You must intervene. And the war continued for further 3 years in the middle of Europe. Now, whilst that didn't stop the war, what the British journalists did certainly saved, and I'd say many people, thousands definitely, and in my case, my dad and my brother, because there were many people who were released after that report. The international community did feel they had to act, and my dad was released from Manchester concentration camp, and he eventually was taken to Croatia, and came to UK in December 1993. Now, as I said, the war continued. The international community kept talking, meeting after meeting, peace agreement after peace agreement, yet the war continues, killing continued throughout Bosnia. And it came to 1995, July, Srebrenica. United Nations was supposed to be protecting 6 safe havens in Bosnia. They didn't protect a single one, and the last one that was still around in 1995 was Srebrenica. And what we again witnessed, we always think it can't get worse, but it kept getting worse. We witnessed United Nations soldiers having to stand aside because they never got reinforcements, never got any help, and allowed Serbian army to come in and take the men, predominantly men. Women were taken for other reasons, but predominantly men were taken away and killed. And over 8,000 men, over a few days, were taken to the woods, to different places, killed en masse. There are mass graves still being dug today in Bosnia, in Europe. There are still people who are missing in Europe, simply because of their religion. Now, whilst I expect Muslims to fight for Muslim rights, whilst I expect to see Jewish people fight for Jewish rights, one thing, and I've said it over the years, we have to fight together for everyone's rights. I do believe in never again. I do believe in United Nations because I think that's the only way this can make it work. The world is getting divided, but we cannot and we must not allow our communities to be divided. I have two girls, and I am really worried what they're going to grow into. And I hope they when they grow up and when they have children, they're happier than me. Thank you for today.
Thank you, Safet. You remind us why these events every year are so important. So I would now like to welcome Amberley Thay, Regional Ambassador of the Holocaust Educational Trust, to read the Statement of Commitment for Holocaust Memorial Day.
Good morning. My name is Amberley Thay. I'm a Regional Ambassador for the Holocaust Educational Trust, and I'm going to be reading the Statement of Commitment. We recognise that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning. We believe that the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's collective memory. We honour the survivors who are still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and of all genocide. We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone for the human capacity for good in the face of evil. We recognise that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability or sexuality make some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learned. We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination and racism. We value a free, tolerant and democratic society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amberly. So I would now like to invite Rabbi Nick Kett, joining us for the first time here at City Hall, to give his reflection and recite the memorial prayer. After that, Anik and Safet will come back onto the stage to light the memorial candle, followed by a minute's silence.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I had the privilege of being with Mohammed and Anissa on the recent trip with the Holocaust Education Trust a few months ago, and it's been really quite inspirational to see you here today, addressing everyone here and online. At this Holocaust Memorial Day commemoration, we pause together in remembrance and reflection, not only because of how the Holocaust ended, but because of how it began. The Holocaust did not begin with extermination camps and gas chambers. It began with language, with words that dehumanized, distorted and divided, words that were repeated often enough and loudly enough until they sounded normal. As survivors become fewer, the way we speak about the past and about each other today matters more, not less. When memory weakens, language fills the gap, and language can either protect human dignity or rapidly erode it. Many British Jews are deeply concerned by the way forms of language that would once have been recognized as dangerous are now dismissed as merely rhetorical, symbolic, or provocative. History warns us that harm does not begin when violence is justified. It begins when hostility is normalized, when people are spoken about as a problem, when context is endlessly found for some hatred but never for others, when outrage becomes selective and silence becomes respectable. This year's theme of bridging generations feels especially urgent. We are moving closer to a world without Holocaust survivors, and responsibility for memory is passing decisively from those who experienced history to those who will interpret it. That transfer is never neutral. We have seen the concerning news that in recent years, more and more schools have chosen not to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, a reduction of over 60% in just 2 years, as some choose what Chief Rabbi Mervis has called the path of least resistance. But remembrance is not meant to be easy, it is meant to be honest. In a city as diverse and vibrant as London, Holocaust Memorial Day calls on all of us, civic leaders, educators, faith communities, and citizens, not only to protect memory, but to protect values of dignity, responsibility, and the courage to stand up for others. Because anti-Semitism has not disappeared, nor has racism, hatred, or the dehumanizing language that makes violence possible. Bridging generations means more than telling stories. It means learning to recognize warning signs and having the courage to respond before words become actions and actions become atrocities, even when doing so is uncomfortable or unpopular. Holocaust Memorial Day is not only about memory, but about responsibility. Responsibility for what we remember, for how we speak, and for what we allow to pass unchallenged. I pray that our remembrance today strengthens those moral boundaries again, and that we learn to recognize the full humanity of all those who who are created in God's image, even when they are not created in our own image. I will now recite a memorial prayer. I'll start in Hebrew and then recite the same prayer in English. If you wish to stand, you are welcome to do so. El Mali Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamasei Menucha Nechoina al Kanfei Ashchina, B'malos Kadoshim Utahorim, Kazahar Akiyam Mazhirim, Es Nishmos Acheinu b'nei Yisrael hakdoshim v'hatoharim shenaflu b'dei harotzchim v'nishpach damam b'Auschwitz Majdanek Treblinka uv'sham machanos hashmad b'Europa shenehergu shenishchatu v'shenisrefu v'shenitbu v'shenechneku al kiddush Hashem bavur shekol hakahal hakadosh hazeh mispalelim bi'aras karas nishmasam began Eden tehei menuchasam Lachain balarachamim yastireim v'seisek nofecha liolamim utzror b'tzror hachayim es nishmosam Adonai hu nachalasam v'yanuchu al mishkavosam v'shalom v'noimar amen. O God, who is full of compassion and who dwells on high, grant perfect rest in the shadow of your divine presence, in the exalted places among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the sky, to the souls of the millions of our holy and pure brethren, whose blood was spilt by the murderers in Auschwitz, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka, and other extermination camps in Europe, who were killed, strangled, burned, and buried alive in sanctifying the divine name. For whose souls we now pray, may their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. May the Lord of compassion shelter them forevermore under the cover of his wings. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is their inheritance, and may they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated, everybody. Thank you very much, Rabbi Kett, for your reflections and leading us in prayer. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our ceremony this morning. On behalf of us all at City Hall, I would like to give our deep thanks to Anik and Safet for sharing their experiences with us. I would also like to thank our Lessons from Auschwitz ambassadors, Mohammed, Anissa and Amberly, who, like the theme, are bridging generations by retelling and reciting these histories. We were honoured to hear from Rabbi Nick Kett. Thank you for your reflections and prayer. And thank you, of course, to our partners, Olivia Marks-Waldman from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and Anna Bradford from the Holocaust Educational Trust. And finally, thank you, of course, to the Jewish Music Institute for their contributions to our event today. And, of course, to Lenka Leichenberg, who we have been so lucky to have with us today, actually all the way from Toronto. So thank you very much. We will now hear a last song from Lenka, which I think she might explain embodies the theme of bridging the generations today. And then after we have heard the final performance, please join us for light refreshments, reflection and the viewing of the 80 Candles for 80 Years exhibition, which is here in London's living room. Thank you, everybody.
After 2.5 years in the Czech concentration and transit camp, Terezínska, my grandmother and my mother were the only survivors of their Jewish family. The rest were murdered, including my grandmother in Auschwitz. My grandmother wrote poetry at Terezínska. The song "Remember the Sun" is based on one of her poems, and it is bridging generations because it stems from my grandmother to my daughter, Rachel Cohen, who wrote the melody for it. And also, it embodies hope for the future. Remember the sun.
That was beautiful. Thank you. So, we'll leave now for the London living room. Thank you, everybody.